Hello and welcome back to the Block Roar podcast. It is Tuesday, February 24th, 2026. And I have to say, looking at the charts this morning, the vibe in the market right now is, well, schizophrenic feels like the only word that actually fits the mood.
Yeah, it's a messy time. We are definitely in a very strange psychological headspace as an industry right now. Complicated doesn't really even begin to cover it.
It's the whiplash, right? I mean, let's just ground you, the listener, in the reality of where we are today. We're sitting here in early 2026. Bitcoin is hovering in the high $60,000 range,
Right.
which historically speaking is incredible. If you had told me 5 years ago we'd be complaining about hovering at 68K, I would have laughed.
Exactly.
But we're all walking around with this collective hangover because just a few months ago, back in October 2025, we were staring at a massive peak of around $125,000.
And that is the problem with expectations. You know, when you touch 125K, 68K suddenly feels like a depression. It is all relative.
It really is. And it's not just the price action we're feeling. It is the human element. We are seeing this huge wave of layoffs, project shutdowns, and really just this pervasive anxiety across the workforce.
Yeah, the human cost is very real right now.
So the mission for today's deep dive is to reconcile those two realities. We have a stack of Block Roar reports in front of us covering this whole chaotic stretch from 2022 all the way to today in 2026. And we're calling this deep dive the crypto Web3 downturn and talent displacement.
Just to be clear right up front, before we dive into the actual data, we need to set the framing for this. The thesis that really emerges from the Block Roar source material here, it isn't your typical crypto is dead narrative.
Right, because we've all read that obituary 1,000 times.
It's basically a genre of journalism at this point.
I think I've read crypto is dead about 10 times just this week.
Exactly. But the data we're looking at today suggests something entirely different. The thesis is really that crypto is reorganizing. It is a story of bifurcation.
Okay, break that down for us.
So on one side, you have the speculative surface area, the meme coins, the low-effort tokens, the hype projects. That side of the market is absolutely imploding.
Just burning to the ground.
Burning to the ground. But on the other side, the institutional rails, things like stablecoins, compliance infrastructure, those are actually deepening and getting much stronger.
Okay, so the fluff is burning off, but the steel beams are holding up.
That is the perfect analogy. But that burning off process, it smells terrible. And it creates a very specific type of labor crisis.
Which is exactly what we are going to unpack today. We're going to look at why layoffs are accelerating even during these price rallies. We will dig into the InfoFi crash caused by X, formerly Twitter.
That is a crazy story.
It really is. And then the big question for anyone listening who works in this space, where is all this displaced talent actually going?
Right, so let's get into it.
Yeah, set the scene for us, because it feels like we had this massive party, and now we are stuck cleaning up the red cups. How exactly did we get to this hangover phase here in early 2026?
To understand the headache we have today, you have to look at the rolling sequence of the last 24 months. If you look at the macro analysis from the sources, 2024 was actually a rebound year.
Right. We were coming out of the bad old days of the 2022 and 2023 crypto winter.
Yeah, optimism was returning, new market structures were forming, we thought we were out of the woods. But then 2025 became what the reports call a rollover year.
Because of that massive run-up to the October peak.
Exactly. It just wasn't sustainable. The sources actually highlight a very specific date for this, October 10th, 2025. That was the day of a massive liquidation cascade.
Oh man, I remember that day. It was just red candles all the way down the chart.
Brutal. It flushed a historic amount of leverage out of the system in just a matter of hours. And that brings us to right now, early 2026. The digestion phase.
The market trying to figure out what things are actually worth without all the speculative froth?
Exactly. But here is where the data gets incredibly paradoxical.
Right. I was just looking at this in the Galaxy Digital report provided in our source stack, and this is the part that frankly doesn't make any sense to me.
Venture capital numbers.
Yes. If you look at the VC numbers, funding actually went up in 2025. It jumped to over $20 billion, up from $11.5 billion in 2024. So if VCs are deploying almost double the capital, why is everyone getting fired?
It's what the analysts are calling the VC paradox. The headline number went up, sure, but the distribution of that money changed completely.
Oh, so?
Well, in previous cycles, capital was spread out like peanut butter. You had an idea, here's a check. You have a slide deck with some buzzwords, here's a check.
The classic spray and pray method.
Precisely. That era is over. The capital in 2025 and 2026 is being redeployed and highly concentrated. It's flowing into fewer, much better capitalized domains.
So it's going into the steel beams you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Stablecoin infrastructure, compliance layers, institutional custody solutions. It is not flowing into the long tail of experimental dApps or, the thousandth yield farming protocol.
So the pie got bigger, but fewer people are actually allowed to eat.
That's a blunt way to put it, but yes, it is a flight to quality, or maybe more accurately, a flight to utility. The projects that are starving right now are the ones that never figured out a business model beyond token go up.
That makes a lot of sense. It shows a real maturation of the capital class. They aren't falling for the same old tricks.
No, they aren't.
But speaking of projects that are starving, we really have to talk about the dead coin metric. I was reading through the Gecko terminal data in our deep dive sources, and the raw numbers are just staggering.
They are eye-watering.
We are seeing dead or failed tokens surging into the millions for the 2024 to 2025 period. Millions.
Yeah, if you look at the chart, the curve just goes completely vertical.
I mean, if you saw that statistic in literally any other industry, say the restaurant business, you would assume the entire global economy had collapsed. Is it really as apocalyptic as it sounds?
We need to put a massive asterisk on that millions number. The source material makes a really important distinction here. This metric is a measure of token survivability, not necessarily business failure in the traditional sense.
Okay, explain the difference for us.
Think about how frictionless it became to launch a token in 2024. We saw the rise of these ultra-low friction launch pads. You could create a token with a funny name and a ticker symbol in about 45 seconds for the cost of a sandwich.
Right, the meme coin factories. I remember seeing people launch tokens live on stream just for a joke.
Exactly. So when the data says 1 million coins died, it usually means a token was launched, traded for maybe 3 hours, the creator pulled the liquidity, and it was abandoned forever.
There was never a company to begin with.
Right. No team, no office, no product roadmap, just digital litter.
So it's essentially financial spam.
Financial spam is the perfect term for it. So while the count is incredibly high, it doesn't mean millions of actual startups went bust.
That is a relief, honestly.
But we shouldn't dismiss the carnage entirely. Because if you want to see the real human cost, you have to look away from the meme coins and look at the gaming sector.
Ah, right. This was the DAPRadar data in the report. That felt much more substantial.
Yes. In just the second quarter of 2025 alone, over 300 gaming dApps went inactive. That represented about 8% of the entire gaming vertical shutting down in 3 months.
And unlike a meme coin, a gaming dApp isn't just one guy sitting in his basement.
No, not at all. A gaming project usually has Unity developers, community managers, graphic designers, narrative writers, sound engineers.
Running your payrolls.
Exactly. When 300 of those shut down, that represents thousands of real jobs just evaporating. That is where this reorganization really hurts the most. These are people building what they thought was the future of entertainment, and the market simply vanished underneath them.
That is tragic. And it really highlights the difference between those low-friction tokens and actual operating businesses. One is a blip on a chart, and the other is a whole team of people losing their livelihoods.
Precisely. And that actually leads us perfectly into another sector that got absolutely wiped out, but for a totally different reason.
Oh, the platform execution.
Yes. It wasn't just market disinterest. It was a policy change. We need to talk about InfoFi and the drama with X.
This is probably the most critical case study in business risk we have seen in the last 5 years.
It is a masterclass in what not to do.
So for the listeners who might have missed this meltdown because they were glued to the Bitcoin price charts, take us back to January 15, 2026. What exactly happened?
It all started with a single tweet. Nikita Beer, the head of product at X, announced they were revising their developer API policies. Specifically, they were banning any apps that, quote, reward users for posting.
And that was the entire business model of the InfoFi or SocialFi sector, right?
The entire model is very simple. You post content, you get engagement, our app tracks that engagement via the X API, and we give you crypto tokens as a reward. But X looked at this and said, this is generating AI slop. It's creating massive reply spam. It is degrading our core user experience. So they cut them off. They revoked API access completely overnight.
Just like that. There was no grace period or a, hey, fix this or else warning.
Immediate kill switch. And this connects to the much bigger concept the sources bring up. Platform risk. If you are building a Web3 business and you're preaching decentralization and censorship resistance, but your entire distribution model depends on the API of a centralized Web2 giant like X.
You don't own your business.
Exactly. You don't own it. You are renting it.
And the landlord can change the locks whenever they feel like it.
The landlord did change the locks. But honestly, if you look at the timeline provided in the deep dive sources, the writing was on the wall for a very long time. This wasn't actually a surprise. It was a slow strangulation.
How do you mean? Walk us through the timeline.
Go back to 2023. That is when X first ended free API access. Then they introduced the enterprise tiers. Do you remember the pricing on those?
I recall it being prohibitively expensive, but I don't have the exact number in front of me.
It was $42,000 a month.
Wow. $42,000. That is more than most early-stage startups' entire burn rate.
Exactly. $42,000 a month just to access the data. And then came the strict rate limits on top of that.
Yeah.
So by the time the actual ban hit in January 2026, the ecosystem had already been suffocated. The ban was really just the final mercy kill.
The lesson there is brutal.
Brutal, but necessary. If your product depends on a single social graph that you do not control, you are vulnerable. You are building a plugin, not a platform.
It really exposes the deep irony of the sector, doesn't it? We spend all this time talking about permissionless blockchains, but the user layer is still incredibly permissioned. We are essentially building castles in someone else's sandbox.
It really forces you to ask, are you building resilient rails, or are you just tenant farming on someone else's land?
That is a very tough reality check. All right, moving on to the other massive force reshaping the labor market right now, we cannot talk about 2026 without talking about AI.
The buzzword of the decade.
Exactly. But I want to get past the hype here. In the context of all these crypto layoffs, is AI actually taking jobs? Or is it just a convenient excuse for CEOs who want to cut costs and signal to their investors that they are, cutting edge?
The sources show it's actually a bit of column A and a bit of column B, but they break this down into three distinct types of impact, which I think is incredibly helpful for anyone trying to figure out if their own job is safe.
Okay, let's unpack these three types. What is the first one?
First, you have direct replacement. Now, the clearest example here isn't strictly a crypto company, but it set the tone for the entire tech sector. Duolingo.
Oh, right, the language app.
Yeah. They cut a huge chunk of their contractor workforce, specifically because they started using AI to generate content and translations. That is your classic robot took my job scenario.
Straightforward replacement. Used to write the practice sentences, now the large language model writes them.
Exactly. And in Web3, we are seeing this in areas like customer support and basic coding tasks. I mean, why hire a junior dev to write a simple smart contract test when an AI agent can do it flawlessly in seconds?
Fair point. So what is the second type of impact?
A cost reallocation. This one is more subtle. This is what we saw with giants like Microsoft and Amazon. They cut thousands of jobs, but not necessarily to replace those specific people with AI agents.
Then why?
They cut the jobs to free up massive amounts of cash to buy AI infrastructure.
So it's I'm firing you so I can afford to buy more GPUs and build more data centers.
Precisely. It is a CapEx shift. They are pivoting their budgets from headcount to compute power.
Wow.
And then the third type is competitive pressure. Look at Chegg, the education tech company. They admitted that AI tools changed their site traffic and consumer demand so fundamentally that they had to restructure.
The market environment changed entirely, so the company had to shrink just to survive.
Exactly.
So how does this specifically apply to the Web3 layoffs we are analyzing today?
Because the crypto protocol isn't exactly Duolingo, well, we see companies like Consensus or Gemini Space Station citing strategic realignment in their layoff announcements. Often, the sources note, this is code for a portfolio shift.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning they're cutting roles in legacy areas, maybe manual QA testing or basic community moderation to free up budget to hire for AI-adjacent roles. It isn't that the total headcount is vanishing forever. It's that the skill set required is shifting 180 degrees.
Right. So if I am a community manager for a gaming coin that just lost its funding and Gemini is actively hiring AI engineers, I'm in a really tough spot. There's a total skills mismatch.
A massive mismatch.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the reorganization part of the thesis.
Which is section 5 of our deep dive today. Where is the talent going? We have thousands of people displaced from Info5, from gaming studios, from failed DAOs. Do they just leave the tech industry entirely and go sell solar panels?
I mean, some definitely do. Industry burnout is very real.
Yeah.
But the data shows a clear migration to what I call the real economy of crypto. The talent is moving to the boring, high-volume sectors.
Boring is good when it consistently pays the rent. What are these specific sectors?
Stablecoins are the big one. The A16's report in our sources notes that stablecoins are now powering tens of trillions in transaction volume.
Tens of trillions.
Yes, that is a massive operational beast. It needs back-end engineers to maintain the rails, product managers to handle banking integrations, and heavy operations staff to manage the treasury.
It's not flashy, is it? It's not we're going to the moon with a dog coin. It's we are processing back-end settlement payments.
Exactly. But it is highly sustainable. And I assume compliance is another huge growth area, especially after everything that happened with FTX and Genesis a few years back.
Oh, huge. Post-FTX, post-Genesis bankruptcies, the regulatory hammer came down incredibly hard. Now, the one thing every surviving crypto firm wants more than anything is to stay out of jail.
It's a great motivator.
It really is. So compliance officers, security experts, internal auditors, those roles are absolute gold dust right now. If you can successfully navigate a complex KYC audit, you can basically name your price.
It is a fundamental shift from visionaries to operators.
We are also seeing new infrastructure pop up specifically to help these displaced people find work. I saw a mention of a platform called hodlancer.com in the source notes. Is this basically like Upwork for the crypto industry?
Conceptually, yes. Hodlancer is a freelance marketplace tailored specifically for this ecosystem, and the value proposition is very clear. You can get paid directly in USDT or USDC, and they have built-in smart contract escrow services to prevent you from getting stiffed by a client.
Which, let's be totally honest, is a chronic problem in this industry.
Right.
When a startup says, do the work and we will send you the tokens next week, that usually translates to you are working for free.
Sadly, yes. So a crypto-native escrow service is a genuine innovation for labor rights in the space. However, I do have to add a strong note of skepticism here based on the reports.
Of course. What is the catch with Hodlancer?
Well, looking closely at the source material, Hodlancer is still operating in beta mode for a lot of its job categories. And critically, they do not publicly disclose their active user counts or their transaction volume.
Ah, no hard data.
Right. So while it's a very promising signal that the Web3 gig economy is trying to professionalize, we really shouldn't treat it as a proven giant just yet. It is a tool, not a savior.
Got it. So use it to find digs, but maybe don't bet the farm on it being your only source of income.
Exactly.
And there is a geographic shift happening too, right? Because the whole digital nomad living in Bali dream seems to be fading a bit in these reports.
It definitely is. Look at Gemini Space Station again as an example. When they announced their recent cuts, they explicitly mentioned focusing their remaining operations in the U.S. and Singapore.
Interesting.
We're seeing a hard move away from the ethos of we are a global DAO living on the internet and a move toward we are a regulated entity with physical offices in very specific, friendly jurisdictions.
So the map is getting smaller and much more defined. You basically need to be where the licenses are.
Exactly. And that radically changes the hiring landscape. If you are located in a jurisdiction that is hostile to crypto or just irrelevant to the new regulatory frameworks, you might find it significantly harder to land those real economy stablecoin jobs.
Okay, let's look forward then. We are sitting here in early 2026. What is the actual out like? The sources mention a concept called a portfolio of proof. What does that mean for someone listening right now who might be really worried about their job security?
So the outlook for the rest of 2026 is described by the analysts as a digestion phase or a base scenario, meaning markets are likely to remain range-bound and companies will continue rationalizing their headcount.
So no immediate bull run to save everyone's job.
Unlikely. So the portfolio of proof is the recommended strategy for workers to survive this specific phase.
Break that down for us. How does a portfolio of proof differ from just, a standard resume?
Well, in the bull markets of 2021 or even early 2024, you could get hired just because you worked at a cool crypto startup. The logo on your resume was enough proof. A recruiter would say, oh, you worked at Protocol X. You must be smart, you're hired.
Right.
Today, if that startup died, and remember the data says millions of tokens died, that past experience might actually be a liability. It suggests to an employer that you were part of a failure.
That is so harsh. Saying I worked at a disaster isn't exactly a great pickup line for a hiring manager.
It isn't, but it is the new reality. So a portfolio of proof means you need to show measurable hard outcomes that are completely independent of your previous company's overall success.
Give me some examples.
Things like, I generated X amount of direct revenue, or I reduced smart contract vulnerability risk by Y%, or I successfully secured compliance license Z in this specific region.
Hard numbers, real business metrics. No more fluff. No more I manage the vibe in the community Discord.
Exactly. No more vibes. Yeah. And the other absolute non-negotiable for workers right now, AI literacy.
Right, tying back to the displacement we talked about.
Yes. You don't need to be a machine learning engineer, but you need to prove in interviews that you can work efficiently within an AI-augmented team. Because if you cannot use the AI tools that are currently replacing the contractors, you are going to be the next contractor replaced.
That is some very tough love, but incredibly valuable. Now, what about the employers listening? What is the advice for founders and executives in the sources?
For employers, the primary mantra right now is switching from bull market headcount, which is just hiring as many bodies as possible to show investors you are growing, to a new metric called runway per role.
Runway per role?
Yes. Every single new hire needs to mathematically justify their existence against the company's survival runway.
If they don't extend the runway, you don't hire them.
Exactly. And circling back to that massive InfoFi crash we discussed earlier, document your platform dependencies.
The landlord risk.
Yes. If your entire business model relies on the X API or Discord or Telegram, you need to officially list that as an existential risk in your quarterly planning. And you need to have a backup plan funded and ready.
Because if Telegram gets shut down in Europe tomorrow, does your company die? If the answer is yes, you have serious work to do.
Exactly. You need to treat your API access like a physical supply chain that could break at any moment. Diversify your distribution channels just like you would diversify your treasury assets.
You wouldn't keep 100% of your company funds in one volatile token, so don't keep 100% of your user access in one volatile social network.
That is the exact lesson.
Man, this has been, honestly, a bit sobering to read through, but also really clarifying. It feels like the industry is finally growing up, and these growing pains just happen to hurt a lot.
They do hurt. But if we're trying to connect this all back to the bigger picture, I really want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought on this.
Let's hear it.
We spent a lot of time today talking about that dead coin explosion, the millions of tokens just dying off. Now, it's very easy to look at that chart and say, the industry is failing, it's all a scam, it's over.
Right, which is exactly the mainstream media take right now. Crypto is just a casino that finally burned down.
But based on the deep dive into the actual infrastructure data today, I would argue the exact opposite. This isn't a failure of the industry, it is the industry's immune system finally kicking in.
The immune system?
Yes. It is actively shedding the dead weight of low-effort speculation. It is burning off the fever so the body can finally focus on the infrastructure that actually works, the stablecoin rails, the compliance networks, the verified products.
So the pain the market is feeling right now is actually the healing process.
It hurts, but yes, it is how the body heals. You simply cannot build a sustainable global financial system on dog coins and yield Ponzi's. We had to crash to clear the deck for what comes next.
The forest fire is clearing out the dead brush so the tall trees can actually grow.
Exactly.
That is a fantastic, if slightly painful way to look at it. The fever is breaking.
Let's certainly hope so.
Well, that is all the time we have for today's deep dive. We really hope this helped you make sense of the chaotic market we are all navigating here in 2026.
It's always a pleasure to break it down with you.
If you found this analysis useful, please make sure to subscribe so you never miss a deep dive. And definitely visit blockrora.com for more insights, the full source articles, and the charts we discussed today, especially that dead coin chart. It really is something you need to see to believe.
You definitely need to go check it out.
Thanks for listening to the Blockrora podcast, and we will catch you next time.